Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and it's time to win some championships. That's right. You did it. You made it. You're here. It's Week 17 in the NFL. That means it's Fantasy Championship time. This is what we're all here for in the first place, to get you there to the top of the mountain, because that's what winners are at the end of the day. We want you to be at the top of that mountain, standing there over the rest of your nerdy friends who like fantasy football as well, and taunting them for the next, about 8-9 months or so, until it all starts over again. And we'll be there for you as well to help us get to that championship, to get that trophy, to get that belt. Of course, Andrew Erickson, the Undertaker himself, and D-Bro, Derrick Brown, the King of Bros, the Fantasy Bro. And hopefully everybody had a really nice holiday season as we approach the new year. But we're going to finish the 2023 fantasy football season. Before we do that, so boys, it's time to look at the sits for Week 17. And this is the hardest thing because Erickson, as you well know, sometimes even the best fantasy managers start to overmanage things, start to look a little bit closer at some of these matchups, maybe too close, maybe overthink. I'm getting a lot of questions already about some of these sits already. Have you seen this too, where people are starting to get cute at the end and it might cost them a fantasy championship?
100%. And I try to tell people, you guys made it to the championship week because you're a good fantasy football manager. Like, don't change your entire process now that you're in week 17. Like, you've made it this far by making the right decisions that work out most of the time. Now, you have not hit at 100% rate. Nobody does. Nobody always makes the right start decisions every single week. But if you make more of the right calls and less of the wrong calls, you want to be looking at your opponent's roster and want them to make those cute decisions where they're really trying to, I don't know, like this guy's got a bad matchup, and maybe overlooking some other things. So don't be that manager. Let your opponents do that. Let your opponents overthink their matchups and not start their studs. So that's the way that I would approach this week.
Speaking of being too cute, Derrick Brown, let's go to you for a second, if we will. You have
words that are usually not involved in the same sentence for me.
No, when you have the championship laying out there for you, obviously, this is that time where you also, trust the process of where you've been. But the matchups are important, especially when you're talking about some of the flex plays and some of the other issues like wide receiver 3 and all the injuries we've had, not to mention more changes at quarterback. Russell Wilson's not playing anymore, so that's another change. Tyrod Taylor's taking over. So there's some more unknowns. You could even throw Jacoby Brissett into that conversation too. It seems like every week of the season we've had unknowns, and Championship Sunday is going to be no different.
It's going to be wild, man. It's going to be a wild week with all the moving parts of quarterbacks and offenses changing and NFL teams switching over from how do we win games to how do we win the NFL draft. It's all going to be interesting, Joe. And that's, I think, just to put a bow on this, don't get too cute. Like I get questions in the Discord. I did all last week. I'm going to get them again. Like, I'm starting Brock Purdy, but he's starting Deebo Samuel. She's starting Brandon Ayuk. Do I play Brock Purdy or do I not?
Play your studs. Play your best players.
Play the players to get points. It's that simple. Like, come on.
And if you're not sure if a player is a stud, they probably aren't. That's the question. So if you're questioning, is this guy a stud? Then he's probably not a stud.
Am I a stud,
You should
Andrew?
have to question your studs. Yes.
Am I a stud, Andrew? All right.
Well, Joe, if you have to ask the question.
I was going to say, if I have to ask it, I'm not. All right, let's get to the guys
you gotta know the answer.
who might not be studs for Week 17. And let's start with the running backs, who are the guys that might be riding the pine. Erickson, we'll start with you. Who's the first guy on your list?
Derrick Henry. Sitting him this week because, number one, he's not a stud, because he's been way too inconsistent all year long. Yes, he's had some good weeks, but he's had a lot of bad weeks too. And most of his bad weeks are games when he plays on the road. The Titans have stark home road splits this year, whether it's Tannehill, whether it's Will Levis, doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They play worse when they play on the road. And he's facing the Texans. 2 weeks ago, Texans held Derrick Henry to 9 rushing yards. 9 on 16 carries. RB 53 overall. So with the Titans playing on the road this week, this is probably Derrick Henry's last game as a Tennessee Titan. Now, he had a good game last week, scored a couple touchdowns, but the rushing production was not there. So unless he's going to be scoring touchdowns left and right, I think Derrick Henry is a very low upside play this week. I have him at the bottom of my RB2 rankings, and I just don't think that he's going to give you enough in a tough matchup against the Texans, who have allowed under 55 rushing yards per game over their last 4 matchups to running backs. Derrick Henry is a floor play at best that you're hoping maybe gets 10 points this week. So I think there's way better paths to upside in your fantasy championship than Derrick Henry.
All right, Debro, who's a running back that's not making the cut for you in the lineup for week 17?
I know we've seen a lot of touchdowns on this guy, but it's got to be Gus Edwards. Miami Dolphins have been just an amazing run defense. Amazing defense overall, really. But since week 11, Miami allowing the second lowest rushing yards per game, 12th lowest missed tackle rate. Yeah, the bus is staying in the garage this week.
Oh, that's so sad to me. I mean, Gus Edwards has been there for us every year, it feels like, the last couple seasons, especially down the stretch, and everyone's trying to replace him all the time. Heck, the Ravens try to replace him all the time. He keeps falling in the end zone, but I understand there's probably better guys to potentially start, even like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire who might have the backfield all to himself at this point, the way things are going for the Chiefs with their health issues. More on that later to come. But let's go back to you, Erickson, another running back that you have concerns with this week in the NFL.
Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones had a great week last week, but he's also playing the Carolina Panthers. That was the best matchup you could ask for a running back. This is not the case against the Minnesota Vikings, who are one of the worst matchups for running backs in the rushing game. Jones played 52% of the snaps last week. A.J. Dillon somehow made it back into the lineup with a fractured thumb and scored a touchdown away from Aaron Jones, despite Aaron Jones seeing 8 red zone touches, did not score a touchdown. A.J. Dillon should be another week healthier from the thumb injury. And you know who's back on the injury report this week? Aaron Jones. So again, he has been someone that's been impossible to trust at any point during the season. Last week was the best spot for him. He delivered, but I would not be chasing that into this week against the Vikings. A much tougher matchup. You're expecting to see A.J. Dillon probably play a little bit more. And last time he faced the Vikings, he was RB35. So again, just another running back where I'm like, I think there are better paths to success, and Jones carries too much risk with him, with other running backs getting involved, with his own re-injury risk and the matchup not being great. I think Aaron Jones is, again, another low ceiling play this week.
All right, Derek, is there another guy you think has a low ceiling or even a low floor that kind of scares you in week 17?
I think the house is burning. I don't even know what to do with any running back in Chicago. Just when we thought it was safe to go back outside and we thought it was safe to play Roshan Johnson, and you see Deontay Foreman got ruled out last week. Boom! Then comes in Khalil Herbert and he says, nah. I can't start any of these guys. And it's not just the fact that we have no clue who's going to get the work. Assuming Foreman is active. We still have no clue who's going to get the work. But the matchup is terrible, too. You look at Atlanta over their last 5 games, 3rd lowest rushing touchdown rate allowed, 5th lowest yards after contact per attempt. For everybody that played Jonathan Taylor last week, you see what happens when you play a running back against the Falcons. He scored a touchdown, but that's it. That saved his day. Besides that, he did nothing. And so I'm not playing this Russian roulette because I'm afraid I'm going to pick the wrong one. It's probably going to happen, man.
Yeah, understandably so. Whether they're all healthy or all banged up, it doesn't seem to give us any clarity of what's going on with that backfield all season long.
We all got Eberflus.
Eberflus. All right, back to you, Erickson. Give me one more running back that scares the bejesus out of you in week 17.
Antonio Gibson, and this is really more of, looks like Brian Robinson may not play. Chris Rodriguez was in a boot after the game. He was taking over as the lead back on early downs. And it's like, okay, like maybe Gibson will finally get a 3-down roll, the negative game script against the 49ers, but we've been down this path already this year, and he just doesn't get a full-time role. Like, you're going to see Derek Gore out there from his ties to Kansas City and Eric Bieniemy. Derek Gore is going to have more carries than Antonio Gibson is. That's what's going to happen. So Gibson will catch a couple passes here and there, but with Jacoby Brissett under center last week, Antonio Gibson had 1 target. Like, Brissett is not taking over quarterback duties to check the ball down to Antonio Gibson. Like, that's not what he's going to be doing. He's going to be out there slinging it to these wide receivers, trying to play catch up against the 49ers offense that's going to score 60 points on the Commanders this week. So even though it seems like Gibson would be a good game script play, with additional work maybe on early downs, he's not going to get goal line work. And this team has shown us under this new regime or the current regime that they just don't want Gibson in a 3-down role. So as enticing as it may look, when Brian Robinson gets ruled out, Chris Rodriguez gets ruled out, like, oh, Antonio Gibson 3-down back. I can't trust it, especially in the championship week. So I'm going to fade Antonio Gibson.
Derek, another running back you can't trust in week 17.
All right. So I understand that people have to start him. I get it. But people need to understand, since Antonio Pierce took over as the head coach, this Las Vegas Raiders run defense is not one to be trifled with, people. Like Jonathan Taylor, I understand if you're going to start him, but you need to temper your expectations. And if you're setting lineups, you're going to have to find ceiling and upside in other places because it's not going to come this week for Jonathan Taylor. Since week 11, the Las Vegas Raiders, 7th lowest rushing yards per game allowed, 6th lowest rushing touchdown rate allowed, the lowest explosive run rate allowed in the NFL. This run defense is not playing around. So for everybody out there that like you're just like, oh, I'm playing JT every single week. Need to consider possibly sitting him. I get if you got to play him, but you need to find ceiling elsewhere.
Yeah, that's one where he's a stud and you probably are playing him. But to the earlier point we made at the beginning of the show, wide receiver 3, flex spot, you're looking for a little bit more touchdown equity there, a little bit more boom potentially to make up for what could be a deficit. Another great situation here, too, is the tools at Fantasy Pros to help you make all these right decisions that we're trying to get the best lineup we possibly can before we get to a little who should I start. Don't forget, everybody, it's not just NFL season. It's also college football season, too. And it's time for the parade in Pasadena. Tradition meets college football action in one epic bowl game. And with DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make every single play count. New customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets just for betting $5 on college football. Right now, you can go over to Betting Pros. And you can check out our content over there on our YouTube channel. We've got all the bowl coverage, predictions, everything you possibly need there with Thor and Bogman and our team. So go make your wagers responsibly and smartly by watching that coverage first and listening to the true experts there when it comes to the Rose Bowl and all the other college football action. And while you're listening to that, you might as well download the app right now for DraftKings Sportsbook and use that promo code FantasyPros when you do. New customers can score 150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on college football only at DraftKings Sportsbook with that promo code FantasyPros. The crown is yours. All right, gentlemen. Let's play a little who should I start at the running back position. These guys are very close in the expert consensus rankings that you can find at fantasypros.com/rankings, or you could use that fantasypros.com/start tool, which is free. Let's start with number 24, James Conner at Philly against number 25, Devon Achane at Baltimore. D-Bro, I'm going to start with you on this one. Who would you rather start, Conner or Achane? You got one spot. Who gets the start?
I'm starting James Conner confidently. I mean, he's the only part of that Cardinals offense that's working. And
Trey McBride's working. I think Trey McBride takes offense to that.
That's fair. That's fair.
Don't you besmirch my McBride. Not in front of me.
That's fair.
Not this close to the new year.
Good call.
Okay, all right.
But I will say, outside of Trey McBride, James Conner's now getting pass game work. We saw this last week. And for everybody out there, the Eagles are not a tough run defense. You can run on them. Like multiple running backs weeks after weeks after weeks have shown this. So the Cardinals might not be passing the ball very well this week. They're going to run the ball well. Play James Conner. I'm going to have him as an RB1.
All right, Erickson, let's go for the next one for you. Najee Harris at Seattle at number 28 or number 31, Gus Edwards. Already made this list for Derrick Brown to sit. So Edwards against Miami or Najee against Seattle. Who gets the start, Erickson?
It's Najee Harris for me. Just a good matchup against the Seahawks, and last 2 weeks, he's been the RB1 over Jalen Warren, despite him not playing great 2 weeks ago and seeing his snaps dwindle. His snaps upticked last week, so they can really run the football. And Gus Edwards, again, it's touchdown or bust with him every single week, so it's just more risky. And where Najee is the goal line back, if the Steelers are going to score some points against Seattle.
Yeah. I see all these advertisements too. Men over 40, your snaps start to dwindle. So it's something that, you start to understand a little bit more about as you get older. At least they're targeting me for that. I don't know. All right, let's go to the must-sit wide receivers on our list here, as I've embarrassed Derrick Brown profusely, and that makes me feel warm and fuzzy. All right, D-Bro, wide receiver to sit. Give me one. Who do you have?
Oh, man. It's going to be Calvin Ridley. Oh. And this all just goes down to the matchup, man. Like, the Carolina Panthers have been no joke against wide receivers. They've allowed the 12th fewest PPR points per target to perimeter wide receivers since week 10, as well as the 6th fewest receiving yards per game. So, yeah, not playing Calvin Ridley. Travis Etienne, Calvin Ridley,
Is that part of the official tools suite of Fantasy Pros? You get Derrick Brown. You get Derrick Brown sounds regarding the feelings of certain players, right? You know how we have like we have the faces like when we do the mock draft wizard and everything like that. Where draft wizard like oh, we liked your draft, we hated your draft. I think we should replace that with sounds about Derrick Brown making your picks and how he feels about them. I like that. Erickson, Ridley's
You
out.
do want people to use the tools, right, Joe?
I would encourage me to take guys specifically I know you don't like just to hear your disgruntled sounds. Erickson, give me another guy that you think at the wide receiver position worries you. This is a very big name. I don't know how you sit him, but I want to hear the case for it.
Oh,
what do you mean?
I think
how do you
can.
not know? What do you mean? He has
What do you mean?
finish inside the top 45.
I know he hasn't had a 100-yard game since week 6. We talked about it yesterday.
Terrible.
I know.
Terrible.
Finished inside the top 45 his last 6 games. Who is it? Stefon Diggs.
But you're
Not
sitting your
stud.
first round pick. That's a tough thing
Who cares?
to do.
Has he been a first round pick over the last month and a half?
How
No.
many teams do you think are in the finals that have Stefon Diggs? That's my thing.
I'm voicing my opinion and
Probably a
analysis to
decent
people
amount.
that may have Stefon Diggs sitting on their bench. Maybe they benched him like 6 weeks ago because they realized, wow, he's not doing anything. Because the thing is, once you bench a guy, a stud player, a player that has high draft capital one time and you're right, you feel fine leaving him on the bench. Like, prove it to me that I should put him back in my lineup. Why should I put Stefon Diggs back in my lineup?
Is he a stud, Erickson?
No.
At this point?
No.
I mean,
no, he has not been a stud. He's not been a stud
Bingo.
since the beginning of last year. He was struggled down the stretch in the second half of last season, and we're seeing it again the second half of this season. So, and then you're considering the matchup. It's not like he's facing he was facing the Chargers last week. That was a perfect spot for him. We saw Gabe Davis absolutely go nuclear, and Stefon Diggs did nothing. So for me, Patriots, second best defense in DVOA against number 1 wide receivers, allowing 50 receiving yards per game or under 50 receiving yards per game to opposing number 1 wide receivers. Like, Diggs had a decent game against the Patriots when he first faced them because he scored a touchdown. Like, that's all you're hoping for is like, oh, will he score a touchdown? So there are plenty of receivers that have touchdown upside, offenses that I think could do better than the Bills this week, playing against the Patriots defense that's been better over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I'm going to sit Stefon Diggs.
The fun thing about this job is there's always tape of you being wrong, but there's also tape of you being right. And I remember back in August, fading Stefon Diggs and arguing with 2 other fellows. I can't remember their names about Stefon Diggs and me saying, oh, I'm just not feeling Diggs this year. I think it's time, he's been in the league a long time. There's bound to be decline here at the age and what we're starting to see here. Feels good. Feels good to get here week 17. Sometimes you have to wait a little longer for your validation, but I love it. Sitting Stefon Diggs is bold, Erickson. It's very bold. I don't know if I would have the cojones to do it still, but you make it good. I like it. I like it. I think it's the right call. It is a little bold when you're sitting your first round pick. I know it's about winning, but at the end of the day, it's really hard to sit there and go, you wake up Monday morning and say, Stefon Diggs, how did I sit him? And then he ended up having a good game. So I don't know if I can find that many wide receivers right now to start over him. That's my thing with the way the quarterback play's been.
I can list you off a bunch of guys I'd rather start.
I'm sure you can.
Diggs.
I'd rather start Stefon Diggs is wide receiver
Collins.
13.
I'd rather start Chris Godwin. I'd rather start Zay Flowers. There are plenty of guys.
Yes, but would you rather
Chase
start?
doesn't play.
See, that's not the question. The question is, would you rather play Noah Brown or Rashid Shaheed or JSN or Gabe Davis?
Those aren't. I'd rather no, not those guys.
But that's the thing. I want to make sure I put that out there. If you're in a 2 wide receiver league, I understand where Erickson's coming from. If
that's why you check the rankings. That's why we do rankings, people.
Check the rankings, bro. If it's a 3 wide receiver league, I think Stefon Diggs is going to play. But you make a good case for fading him anyway, regardless. D-Bro, who's another wide receiver you're fading. This one's a gut punch to you, I know.
Drake London.
Poor Drake London.
And it's really more of like the Hadouken from Arthur Smith, man. Like, he keeps punching us and punching us and punching us down. And it is what it is. It's a terrible matchup for Drake London since week 10. Chicago's allowed the 6th fewest PPR points per target to perimeter wide receivers. To be honest, I don't know how Atlanta really moves the ball in this game. Chicago has been just an elite defense. And yes, they have people versus passing games versus the run game. I don't know how they're going to move the ball. We shall see. The under is fully in play in that game, and I would happily bet all the unders for Drake London's props this week because I don't think he does much of anything.
All right, so London also riding the pine. Erickson, give me another name at wide receiver that's out for you.
So you mentioned him briefly before, Noah Brown for me. 2 of his 3 best games have come this year with Nico Collins not in the lineup. So we've seen one big game from Noah Brown all year long when Collins has been healthy. So again, I just don't like those odds. I know that it is a good matchup against the Tennessee Titans. I know that CJ Stroud is going to come back, but I just don't think that Noah Brown is necessarily a focal point of this offense when they are designing a game plan. Looking at last week, he had 0 targets in the first half until garbage time in the fourth quarter. Like, Noah Brown was an absolute ghost. Like, he would have put up a 0 stat line if it weren't for garbage time with Davis Mills just kind of coming in and just checking the ball down to Noah Brown. So for me, I don't think that the boom potential with him, with Collins back and healthy, even with Stroud under center, I don't think it outweighs the risk potential where he could just be a total goose egg for you in your lineup. And I just don't think that this is the spot or the week in week 17 to take a risk on Noah Brown. It'd be different if Collins wasn't playing.
Sure.
I think that he would have definitely more upside, but just the odds, I think, are stacked against him more than for Noah Brown this week, even in a plus matchup with Stroud back.
So the only question I have, Erickson, is with Nico, is he really fully like, he only played 47% of the snaps last week?
Well, I mean,
like,
the team had 7 offensive plays in the second half, and then it was the fourth quarter, and they put Davis Mills in. So, like, it was a blowout. Like,
that's
same
fair.
thing with
That's
Singletary.
I know people are going to ask. That's why I'm throwing it out there.
Because
You're a man of the
Singletary
people,
only
Derek.
played like 44% of the snaps because they put in Pierce at the end of the game in the fourth quarter when there was already a blowout.
All right, let's get to another wide receiver for you, Derek. Who is the last guy on your list here that you're worried about starting?
I'm not playing Curtis Samuel. Look, I'm sorry if you missed the fantasy points gravy train earlier in the season. I'm sorry. We talked about him numerous weeks on numerous shows. But if you're playing Curtis Samuel at this point, you're just point chasing. So please don't. Like, San Francisco has been shutting down opposing slot wide receivers since week 10, 12th lowest PPR points per target to slot wide receivers. So yeah, I don't really want to play anybody from the Commanders offense, to be honest.
Gotcha. All right. Next guy on your list and final one here, Erickson, is the guy we talked about on the prediction show just yesterday as well. So let's talk more about George Pickens again.
Yeah, speaking of not chasing points, George Pickens for me is someone I don't not want to chase into this week. Obviously, massive week on Christmas Eve, almost 200 receiving yards, but he had 6 targets, like 22% target share, nothing out of the ordinary. His role didn't change in the offense, except he just happened to catch slants and downfield balls that he doesn't always catch or rip off 80-yard touchdowns on. So I just don't think what he did last week was super sustainable, especially in a tougher road matchup against the Seahawks, who are tougher against perimeter receivers, top 10 and fewest fantasy points allowed versus 4th most against slot wide receivers. So I think Seattle's a team that you want to attack more over the interior of their defense and not necessarily the perimeter. Last 2 weeks, Seattle has limited opposing receivers to under 88 yards total, which is 4th fewest for me. So George Pickens for me, he's boom or bust. He boomed last week, so you know what's coming next.
All right, well, let's put it to the test. Who should I start? Number 27 ranked George Pickens against Seattle, or on the other side of this game, Tyler Lockett at number 28. Erickson?
I think that Lockett just has a safer floor.
Okay, and Derek's nodding his head. He's in agreement. Derek Brown, number 43, Odell Beckham Jr. against Miami, or number 47, Curtis Samuel against San Francisco. Hey, this is real talk right here.
I'd love to say neither.
I know,
Neither.
but you can't. Like, this is what happens.
Just start
sometimes.
OBJ. He's got more touchdown equity.
I'll go. Yeah, I'm going to go with OBJ. Big game.
MVP
I'd rather be tied to
quarterback,
Lamar
right?
than Brissett.
Lamar's the MVP.
Yeah.
Got to play
Hey.
the wide receiver that's got the MVP quarterback. If everyone's telling me Lamar's MVP,
Surely not Brock Purdy, apparently, right now.
it's not Brock Purdy. It's not. It's Christian McCaffrey, and I'm gonna
No, it's not. It's Lamar Jackson.
Gonna beat this until
God,
he
here we
loses to
go.
Miami this week. And when they lose to Miami
Lamar
this week,
Jackson has
everyone's
the
gonna look it
team
up.
with the best record, and he actually lost. His best receiver is a rookie wide receiver.
That's
like,
fair.
people don't understand.
It's
He
fine.
lost his
Preach.
best
Preach,
offensive
Erickson.
player in Mark
Preach.
Andrews, and he's like top 5 in yards per attempt.
Question:
Imagine if Lamar
when
Jackson
they
had the
lose to
49ers
Miami
weapons.
this week, when they lose to Miami this week,
They're not going to.
when they do, who's at the top of the board? Who's at
They're
the
not
top of the
gonna
board?
lose.
Who?
I
That's
mean,
not
at
what
the
I'm
top
saying.
of the board.
Okay, live in the world where they do. Let's say something happens, things go awry, ball doesn't bounce their way, Miami plays a great game. Who's
Well, I mean,
at
I
the
think
top
it
of
also
the board?
depends on
It's
if
not
Lamar
Purdy.
plays bad or not.
It's not
I mean,
Purdy.
It depends on if Lamar plays
It's
well or
not
not.
Lamar. It becomes Christian McCaffrey, who's going to go absolutely bananas against Washington, and people are going to go, it's that
not
guy.
betting on a non-quarterback.
I think it's time. I think it's time. And it's not going to be Tua, even if they win it. I'm telling you right now. All right, let's get to the other positions here. And this is funny because I just said his name. So, D-Bro, give me a quarterback that you want to sit. See what I did there? See what I did?
Hey, look. We weren't talking about Tua in that conversation just now.
I just said at the very end, I said, and even if Miami wins, it ain't going to be Tua. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to be Tua either.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, Tua, we've seen the range of outcomes for his fantasy point production per week has been wide. And I think that this is another bust game. I mean, looking at Tua going against the Baltimore Ravens, their last 5 games, 7th fewest passing yards per game allowed, 8th lowest passer rating. Like, you could run the ball versus Baltimore. You do not need to throw the ball versus Baltimore. Now, Miami's probably going to do that anyway, but we shall see. Mike McDaniel's a smart guy. I think they kind of put the wraps on Tua and they run the ball and they run it religiously and just lean on their defense in this game. And if that's the case, Tua's not scoring fantasy points.
All right,
Sit him.
Erickson, a quarterback you're worried about who you don't think can win you a championship.
Trevor Lawrence. I mean, he hasn't been winning people much of anything all year long. Look, Panthers are 3rd worst matchup for fantasy quarterbacks this year. And he's just like not healthy. Like every week he's entering the game with concussion, shoulder injury, ankle injury. Like he's totally banged up. He says he's going to try to play this week, but at like what extent? Like we were talking about benching Calvin Ridley. It's for all the same reasons. Like it's just a horrible matchup. You know, last week was the best matchup you could ask for against the Buccaneers, and Lawrence didn't even finish the game. So you got to get away from
also
Trevor Lawrence.
Looked bad when he was in the game. So
yes,
just throw that out there.
Yes, that again, like he's just not 100%. Like he cleared the concussion protocol. Should he have cleared the concussion protocol? But the Jaguars are desperate right now, but they're also they've lost 4 games in a row. They were 8-3 or 9-3. Now they're 9-7. You know, it's just not a good look for Trevor Lawrence.
All right, Erickson, what about tight end? Who's out for you potentially at that position in Week 17?
Dalton Kincaid, just, with Dawson Knox back the last 3 games, Kincaid's production is just absolutely plummeted.
Which is
Played
so
fewer
upsetting.
snaps than Knox last
Bad.
week. Only ran around 52% of the dropbacks. Tight end finishes 29, 80, 52, and the matchup is horrible. Patriots are the 2nd worst matchup for fantasy tight ends this season, so Kincaid, you just can't trust him with Knox back in the lineup.
All right, D-Bro, who's another big fade at tight end?
Well, people are going to gravitate right back to Dalton Schultz because CJ Stroud is going to play this week, and no, you do not need to. Tennessee has been shut down versus tight ends this year. 7th fewest receiving yards allowed per game. One receiving touchdown all year given up to tight ends. One.
I wasn't. Erickson, did you know how many?
1.
Only 1. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Just one.
D-Bro, give me a defense that doesn't make the cut for championship week.
Just going to stay with Houston, man. I can't play them. Their secondary has fallen apart. Yes, they have a good run defense. Yes, you're probably facing Will Levis. Those are good things. But since week 12, DST 16, no, I'll play them.
Erickson, a defense you don't want to play in week 17 for all the marbles.
Dallas. They're playing Detroit, projected shootout. I just think there are way better options. I mean, why would you play defense against Jared Goff, even though he's on the road, when there are defenses playing like 12 different backup quarterbacks this week? I just think there's like a bazillion other better ways. I mean, Dallas DST, I think, is like ECR 12 or 13, so like on that fringe, but it's like they're more name cachet than anything at this point. So I think you could drop them and just add a DST with a better matchup overall.
Why play them when you can play the Bears?
Yeah.
The Bears. Bears. Who, by the way, were disappointing last week. So I'm going to take the L on this one. They had 3 points, so wasn't great.
Won. They covered, so that's all
I know they
about.
won, but it doesn't matter. I told people to start the Bears defense, so I'm going to own it.
Same.
God forbid anybody in the fantasy community owns anything when they're wrong, but I'm going to own it. I was wrong about that. They had gone 14, 17, and then they put up a 3 spot against freaking Arizona in their own building. Frustrating, but against Atlanta,
are hard to project because they're all turnover based. As we try to tell everybody that it's never a lock.
I understand. Well, there's going to be turnovers this weekend. That's for darn sure. But again, if you need extra help, make sure you're using the Fantasy Pros tools. Go check out the rankings in the ECR or fantasypros.com/rankings and fantasypros.com/start. That very important Who Should I Start tool that will help you make those good decisions. Or you can just hit us up on Discord, fantasypros.com/chat. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on. For Andrew Erickson and Derek Brown, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.